Hi, I'm Doc Martin, the lone journalist for KRAZ TV with another. Just because it's small doesn't mean it isn't a good book or a great book, because this one tells the story. The Last Duel. A true story of crime, scandal, and a trial by combat by Eric Jager, or Jager. See, I'm butchering simple names. Simple. Anyways. Here is a picture of the author, an award-winning professor of English at UCLA. Eric Jager holds a PhD from the University of Michigan and also is taught at Columbia University. He is the author of two previous books, The Book of the Heart, a study of heart imagery in medieval literature, and Blood Royal, a true tale of crime and detection in medieval Paris, as well as numerous articles for acclaimed academic journals. He lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Peg. Who puts this book out? It is put out by Crown Trade Paperback Edition. So there you go. This is a story for the Zero Channel because it involves things that children, I hope, never have to deal with, but it's a true story. A taut page turner with all the hallmarks of a great historical thriller. Well, this guy went to France and did the research. The gripping true story of a duel to end all duels in medieval France as a resolute knight defends his wife's honor against the man she accuses him of a heinous crime. In the midst of the devastating 100 Years' War between France and England, Jean de Carouges, a Norman knight fresh from combat in Scotland, returns home to yet another deadly threat. His wife, Marguerite, has accused Squire Jacques Legris of rape. A deadlocked court decrees a trial by combat between the two men that will also leave Marguerite's fate in the balance. For if her husband loses the duel, she will be put to death as a false accuser. While enemy troops pillage the land and rebellion and plague threaten the lives of all, Carouge and Legris meet in full armor in a walled field in Paris. What follows is the final duel, ever authorized by the Parliament of Paris. A fierce fight with lance, sword, and dagger before a massive crowd that includes the teenage King Charles VI, during which both combatants are wounded, but only one fatally. Based on extensive research, The Last Duel brings to life a colorful, turbulent age and three unforgettable characters caught in a fatal triangle of crime, scandal, and revenge. What can I say? The Last Duel is at once a moving human drama, a captivating true crime story, and an engrossing work of historical intrigue with themes that echo powerfully centuries later. We'll close the door a little bit. I can't help it, it's the neighbors. So anyways, what did he say? Well, he says that he packed up his stuff. Okay, here it is. The idea for this book first occurred to me 10 years ago while reading a medieval account of the legendary quarrel between Jean de Carouge and Jacques Legris. Fascinated by the story, I began collecting everything I could find about the Carouges-Legris affair. Eventually, I traveled to Normandy and Paris to explore manuscripts, archives, and experience the place where the drama unfolded more than 600 years ago. The resulting book is a true story based on the original sources, chronicles, legal records, and other surviving documents. All persons, places, dates, and many other details, including what people said and did. There are often contradictory claims in court, sums of money paid or received. Even the weather are real and based on the sources. That's journalism. When the sources disagree, I give the most likely account of events. When the historical record is silent, I use my own invention to fill in some of the gaps while always listening closely to the voices of the past. What a story. There were two guys, and they were friends for a long time. But at first when I started reading it, I thought Carouge, it means Carl the Red, Carl Rouge, Car Rouges. He was vindictive and jealous and all of that stuff, but in the end, he's just a poor guy. He was a ladder climber, you know. He wanted to always be in, and he was born into some money. But in those days, you swore fealty. So the main count, Count Pierre, I guess this is what started it. Even the men, everybody, it's just something they did. Okay, so I'm going to tell you what they did. They swore fealty. They get on their knees and said, "You're my master. I'm going to do you forever." And the guy, the king, everybody, all the head guy that accepted their fealty would come down and kiss them on the mouth. Just the way it was. So, Gris started coming up. He was a squire, and he started accumulating lands. And Carouges got a little jealous because there were places that he wanted that the Count Pierre favored. Now, these were fiefdoms, and they were loosely aligned to the King of France. They were just getting started as a completed nation, but they were very powerful in their positions and where they were. So anyways, in 1380, 70s, 80s, Carouge said, "Well, I'm broke. I got to go on this campaign." And so they went over to Scotland because the King of Scotland needed some help. And so he got these French knights to come over in ships. And then they went through the English countryside and pillaged and stole and whatever else they did, you know. So... Anyways, when he got back, well, before he left, he married into the Thieberville family. Now, Richard Thieberville IV was in power at the time, but his father had instituted crimes against the king and wanted to take over, but he got crushed, and all the knights got rounded up, and most of them were killed, and Thurberville actually was spared. So he said, "I'm going to do better. I'm not going to fight the king anymore. I'll be a good boy." And so they let him keep his lands, and then he died, but his mother, Nicole, had a place. Well, anyway, their daughter, Marguerite. Well, I don't know how the story's in there, but you'll have to read the book. But Carouges marries Marguerite. And they lived together for 3 years before he goes off to war in Scotland. So when he goes off to war in Scotland, he comes back, he's hurt, he's got fever, he's about to die or really sick. It's amazing that he even lived. But he comes back, and his wife decides that she doesn't want to live with the mother-in-law, so she lives in Carouges in her house or a castle and a little way away. So anyways, while he's gone, Gris gets his eye. Excuse me. Let me back up here. When they're married, Gris has never met her. Then 3 years later, before he's getting ready to take off, he comes to a party, and his rival that he's peed off about at Legris, because he's getting rich and all these other things, is there. So he tries to make up with the guy. Hey, let's have a party. Here's my wife. And he said, I want you to kiss her on the mouth as fealty. So, not anything other than that, really, I guess. But he does that. And so that must have really triggered Legris. So anyway, when Carausius goes off to war to Scotland to do his pillaging and stuff, and he stays away a year or something, Gris, one day, now Marguerite keeps her people close to her because, she's by herself for that year or so. So when Legris comes in there and his manservant or his page or whatever that's taking care of him, he has them lure her servant, manservant, and her handmaiden or maiden servant, woman, away to go do something or go get him something to eat, whatever he did. Then he grabs her up, using his knife, threatens her, and takes and drags her off and rapes her. So, she is beside herself, and I really believe that happened. A woman's not going to sit there and tell you that kind of stuff. And if she got caught lying, she would be killed. So I don't think that she lied, There's always that controversy. So anyways, when he gets back, he can barely move around and all of that stuff. But she tells him the story. Well, now he's really pissed off. Carausius is pissed. So he but goes by the book, though, and he goes all the way through the courts, and he appeals to the king. And they said, it's his word against hers, and then he's wanting to take up for her. So you guys have to fight it out. There's money paid. There's all in the records, of course. Now Eric went and did all this work and found out that finally in the end, it took like a year or so, or 2 years, just to go through all of this to where they just said, look, you're going to have to fight the duel. But if Carausius loses, she gets burnt at the stake. So it was a great big deal. To tell you, the whole nation knew about it. It was, and it was in 1380, 82, somewhere in there. And they just said, well, you're going to have to fight it out. So they wore armor in that day, and Carausius had not been knighted, but he got knighted at the end, and knighted in Scotland. Well, a squire couldn't fight a duel with a knight unless he was knighted. So the king knighted Legris just so he could fight this duel with Carausius, which is amazing. But that's what happened, is he gave him a last minute knighthood. So then they put them together, and they walled them in a little narrow place to where they could only turn with their horse and come back at each other. And they had, they sharpened the spear on the end of the lance and all, and they ran at each other and stove each other in, and it was just horrendous. Then they ran at each other again. They killed each other's horses. Poor old horse. Can you imagine that? So the war horses died, and so they were on their feet. And Gris got first blood. He wounded Carausius a little bit. But Carausius was also weak. Now, he's been fighting fevers, and he isn't well. But he's pissed off. I'm glad I can say this on the adult channel. So anyways, they're whacking it out and going and going and going and going. And finally, Carausius knocks Legris on his back. Now, in armor, you can't get up that easy. So he jumps up on top of him where he can't get up. And he's still fighting and all that stuff, but he's not doing any good because the knives and anything can't go through the armor and stuff. But finally he opens that helmet up and looks at that guy's face, and he takes his dagger and stabs Legris in the throat and kills him. So that's a true story. That really did happen. So he kills Legris, and so the king said, well, Carouges and Marguerite, you were right. He's the asshole that did it, you know. So he dies, and the king gave Carouges 6,000 livres and some land and all of that stuff, and vindicated everybody, and everybody went back to normal and all that stuff. And Carouges lived 10 more years, and he was killed in another battle for the King of France. But Charles I, it was so long of a trial that Charles VI's father was involved, and then when he died, Charles VI took over the kingdom of France, and that's the rest of the story. I know this is a long story but it's a true story, and it was the very last in the 1384, whatever, 6. No more duels after that, but it was called a parliamentarian duel trial by the parliament. I mean, it was a big governmental deal to do this, and it was the very last in the history of France. But justice probably, well, you could say, I guess, was served, right? So I hope that you enjoyed this little spiel I've been going on with. I'm not, I want to open up the book and go read through it, but I'll let you read the book. See how thin it is? We got this book at the Tucson, Pima County Public Library, and you can get it at yours. And just know what a great job of history, and people kept records until to this day, and that's how this story still is told today. Thanks for watching KRAZ TV, and watch all of our other shows at the Zero channel. If you go to KRAZ TV on the YouTube, at the top of the channel page, you'll hit other channels, and there will be Zero channel, where it's an adult book, site. And then from there we have over 200 books or about of adult issues and other great how-to books and nature and all of that. But this was a story that needed to be told, and I think it needs to be repeated like I did today. Thanks for watching KRAZ TV.